You are stripped of your title, your pack, and my protection." Alpha King Cassian's voice echoed through the obsidian hall, cold and absolute. "Leave the territory by dawn, Luna. If you are found within my borders again, you will be hunted as a rogue." Luna stood trembling, the marble floor freezing against her bare feet. Her hand drifted instinctively to her flat stomach. The pack doctor's words from only an hour ago rang in her ears. "You're expecting—" "Cassian, please," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of his icy stare. "There is something you don't know." "I know enough," he cut her off, turning his back to her. "Go." She swallowed the truth. He didn't want her. He would never want their children. The diner bell chimed, cutting through the heavy scent of fried potatoes and stale coffee. Luna wiped her hands on her faded pink apron, plastering a tired but genuine smile on her face as she approached the corner booth. "2 cherry pies, extra whipped cream, just as promised," she said, sliding the ceramic plates onto the scratched formica table. 5-year-old Leo dug his fork in immediately, his messy mop of raven black hair falling into his striking, icy blue eyes. Next to him, his twin sister Mia was far more meticulous, carefully scraping the whipped cream to the side before inspecting the crust. Her hair was a softer shade of midnight, but she shared the exact same piercing blue eyes as her brother. Eyes that haunted Luna every single time she looked at them. Eyes that belonged to a king who had discarded her like yesterday's ash. "Eat slow, Leo," Luna murmured, reaching out to brush a crumb from his cheek. "I'm starving, Mom," Leo mumbled around a mouthful of pastry. "We ran all the way from Mrs. Gable's house." Luna's smile faltered slightly. "Ran? I told you to stay on the sidewalk and walk. We have to be—" "Careful," Mia finished for her, looking up with a gravity that didn't belong on a kindergartner's face. "We know. Don't let people see how fast we are." Luna swallowed the lump forming in her throat. She had moved to Oakhaven, a sleepy human town nestled on the absolute edge of nowhere, precisely because it was off the radar of any major werewolf pack. For 5 years, she had lived a ghost's life. She worked double shifts, kept her head down, and suppressed her wolf aura so deeply she often felt hollow. But the twins were growing. Their latent abilities were bubbling to the surface, and keeping them concealed was becoming a daily, terrifying battle. "Exactly," Luna said, keeping her voice light. "Just normal kids playing normal games." She turned her gaze to the diner's foggy window, watching the rain blur the neon open sign. The weather matched the persistent ache in her chest. She had loved Cassian with a ferocity that defied reason, even when his political ambitions and the whispers of his manipulative counsel had begun to build a wall between them. The accusation of treason, falsified documents planted in her quarters by a rival female vying for the Luna title, had been the final blow. Cassian hadn't even investigated. He had simply looked at her with eyes stripped of all warmth and delivered his verdict. The diner door swung open, bringing in a gust of freezing autumn wind that carried a scent that made Luna's blood run entirely cold. Pine needles, crushed rain, and underneath it, the heavy metallic tang of an alpha's dominance. Luna froze, the empty tray in her hands clattering against the edge of a table. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. 3 men had just walked in. They wore dark tailored coats that looked absurdly out of place in the rundown human diner. But it wasn't their clothes that gave them away. It was the way they moved, predatory, silent, and claiming the space the moment they stepped inside. Wolves. Not just wolves, his wolves. She recognized the one in the center instantly. Silas, Cassian's beta. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Luna's lungs. What were they doing here? Oakhaven was hundreds of miles from the Royal Pack's territory. Had they found her? Had they discovered the twins? "Mom?" Leo's voice pulled her back. He was staring at her, a smear of cherry filling on his chin. "Are you okay? You smell like fear." Luna shushed him frantically, stepping in front of the booth to block the men from seeing her children. "Quiet, Leo. Not a word." Silas wasn't looking her way yet. He was speaking in low tones to the waitress at the front counter, sliding a folded map across the surface. They were looking for something. Or someone. Luna's mind raced. The back door. The kitchen led to the alley. If she could get the twins out now, they could disappear into the woods before Silas ever caught her scent over the grease and coffee. "Slide out, both of you," Luna whispered harshly, not taking her eyes off the men at the front. "We're leaving through the kitchen." Mia immediately slid out of the booth, her small hand grabbing her brother's jacket. But Leo, ever the curious one, peeked around his mother's legs. "Who are those men?" Leo asked, his voice ringing out slightly too loud in the quiet diner. At the sound, Silas stopped mid-sentence. He slowly turned his head. His eyes swept across the diner, bypassing the empty booths until they landed squarely on Luna. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. Silas's eyes widened, his posture snapping instantly to attention. "Luna?" he breathed, the word carrying across the room. It was too late to run. The silence in the diner stretched until it felt brittle enough to snap. The few human patrons barely noticed the shift in the atmosphere, but to Luna, the air had turned thick and suffocating. Silas stared at her, his expression a chaotic mix of shock, confusion, and a lingering respect that he hadn't yet been ordered to discard. "Mom, why did he call you that?" Leo tugged at the hem of her apron. Luna ignored the question, her maternal instincts surging, overriding the terror. She grabbed Leo and Mia by their hands, practically hauling them out of the booth. "Silas," Luna said, her voice a low, warning hiss as he took a step toward her. "Don't!" You're here," Silas stammered, his gaze dropping momentarily to the two small children clinging to her sides. His eyes, trained to notice every detail, locked onto their faces. The shock on his features morphed into something profoundly dangerous. Realization. "Get back," Luna snarled, a low, guttural sound tearing from her throat that she hadn't made in 5 years. Her wolf, dormant and starved, clawed at the surface to protect her pups. Silas raised his hands in a placating gesture, but his two enforcers moved to flank him, their bodies tensing for a fight. "Luna, wait! The king! The king has no jurisdiction here," she spat, backing toward the swinging kitchen doors. "This is neutral territory." "Not anymore," Silas said softly. "The northern pack surrendered last week. This town falls under the royal boundary now. We're doing a border sweep." The ground seemed to drop out from beneath her. Oakhaven was his now. There was no running. There was nowhere left to hide. "Please, Silas," Luna begged, the fire in her eyes extinguishing into desperate, raw terror. "Just let me walk out the back door. Tell him you didn't see me. Tell him whatever you want. Just let us go." Silas looked at the twins again. The midnight hair. The piercing, unmistakable blue eyes of the royal bloodline. He swallowed hard. "You know I can't do that. Not now that I've seen them." Before Silas could give an order, Luna moved. Adrenaline and sheer primal panic fueled her. She shoved the kitchen doors open with her shoulder, dragging the twins with her into the humid, chaotic heat of the diner's back room. "Hey, you can't come back here," the line cook yelled. But Luna was already weaving past the stainless steel counters. "Keep running, babies, don't stop," she cried out. She burst through the heavy metal exit door, spilling out into the cold, rain-slicked alleyway. The garbage dumpsters smelled rancid, but the open air meant freedom. She scooped Mia into her arms, grabbing Leo's hand again, and sprinted toward the main street. If she could make it to her beat-up sedan parked 2 blocks away, they might have a chance. Behind them, the metal door slammed open. The heavy boots of the enforcers splashed in the puddles. They were faster. They were always going to be faster. Luna rounded the corner out of the alley onto the main sidewalk, her chest heaving, the rain plastering her hair to her face. She was so focused on looking over her shoulder that she didn't see the wall of a man stepping out of a sleek, black SUV idling at the curb. She slammed into him hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She stumbled backward, clutching Mia tighter, and looked up to apologize, to scream, to do anything to get past. The words died in her throat. The world stopped spinning. The rain seemed to freeze in midair. Standing before her, looking exactly as imposing, breathtaking, and terrifyingly cold as the day he banished her, was Alpha King Cassian. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders impossibly broad under a bespoke charcoal suit that clung to his muscular frame. His jaw was clenched, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, those striking, icy blue eyes, were locked onto her face. For a second, there was a flicker of something in his gaze. Surprise? Pain? It was gone before she could name it, replaced by a mask of hardened stone. "Luna." His voice was a deep rumble that vibrated through the pavement, slipping straight into her bones. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She instinctively stepped back, trying to push Leo behind her legs, trying to shield them both with her own body. Cassian's gaze flicked down. He finally noticed the two small figures huddled against her. Leo, unbothered by the tense silence, peered around Luna's leg. He tilted his head, his brow furrowing as he looked up at the towering man blocking their path. He stared at Cassian's raven hair, and then directly into Cassian's eyes. Mia, held in Luna's arms, turned her head to look at the man as well. Cassian froze. The Alpha King, a man who had commanded armies and brought entire territories to their knees, stopped breathing. The color drained from his face as he stared down at the two 5-year-olds. The silence was absolute, broken only by the patter of rain against the asphalt. Then, Leo pointed a small, pudgy finger at the king. He looked up fearlessly, tilting his head as he studied the man's features. "You look like us," Leo stated, his young voice crystal clear in the quiet street. The rain continued to fall, a freezing deluge that soaked through Luna's thin cotton apron, but she couldn't feel the cold. The only thing registering in her veins was the suffocating, overwhelming heat of the Alpha King standing inches away. Cassian did not move. He seemed entirely paralyzed. A man turned to granite by a 5-year-old's innocent observation. His icy blue eyes darted frantically from Leo's face to Mia's, tracing the line of their jaws, the slope of their noses, and the unmistakable deep azure of their irises. A mirror reflection of his own soul, staring back at him in the rain. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, Cassian drew in a breath. The action expanded his massive chest, and Luna watched his nostrils flare as he took in their scent. Werewolves didn't need DNA tests. Scent was absolute. Beneath the smell of cheap diner grease and cherry pie, the twins carried the crisp, sharp scent of winter pine and ozone, the exact signature of the royal bloodline, intertwined flawlessly with Luna's soft, wild vanilla. "Mine," Cassian whispered. The word wasn't a question. It was a physical weight dropping between them, vibrating with a possessive resonance that made Luna's wolf thrash against her ribs in sheer terror. "No," Luna snapped back, her voice shaking but fiercely sharp. She shoved Leo fully behind her legs and gripped Mia so tightly the little girl whimpered. "They are mine." Cassian's eyes finally snapped up to meet hers. The hardened mask he had worn for 5 years had fractured, revealing a storm of unimaginable chaos underneath. Betrayal, shock, and a terrifying possessive fury warred on his strikingly handsome face. "How old are they, Luna?" His voice was dangerously low, barely audible over the patter of the rain, yet it carried the undeniable, crushing weight of an alpha command. Luna gritted her teeth, using every ounce of her willpower to resist the urge to submit to that tone. "That is none of your business. Let us pass, Cassian. Now." She tried to step around him, but he moved with blinding speed, entirely ignoring the human street around them. He planted his massive frame directly in her path, his chest almost brushing her shoulder. "How old?" he repeated, the rumble in his chest vibrating through the damp air. Before Luna could formulate a lie, the sound of heavy boots splashing into puddles echoed from the alley behind her. Silas and the two enforcers burst onto the sidewalk, completely cutting off her retreat. She was boxed in. The street was practically empty due to the storm, but even if there had been witnesses, no human would intervene against four men who moved with the predatory grace of apex predators. Silas skidded to a halt, taking in the tableau. His eyes widened as he looked from Cassian to the twins, the realization finally clicking into place for the beta. "Alpha," Silas breathed, bowing his head immediately. "We found her in the diner." "We didn't know." "Silence," Cassian commanded without looking away from Luna. His gaze was burning a hole straight through her. He reached out, his large calloused hand hovering just inches from Leo's wet hair. Luna slapped his hand away. The smack echoed sharply down the street. The two enforcers behind Silas instantly snarled, stepping forward to defend their king, but Cassian threw a hand backward, silently ordering them to stand down. He didn't blink at the strike. He just stared at the red mark blossoming on the back of his hand, as if realizing for the first time that Luna was truly real. "Get in the car," Cassian said, his voice dropping all emotion, leaving only a chilling, hollow authority. "I would rather die," Luna spat, clutching her children closer. "I told you, this is neutral territory. You have no right to touch us. The northern borders fell a week ago. You are standing on my land, Luna," Cassian replied, taking a step closer, crowding her space until she was forced to lean back against the slick brick of the building. "You are harboring my heirs. I am not asking you, I am telling you. Get in the SUV before I make a scene that terrifies them and carry all three of you in there myself." Luna looked at his eyes. She saw the absolute, terrifying truth there. He wasn't bluffing. He would tear the street apart if she pushed him. She looked down at Mia, whose bottom lip was trembling, and Leo, who was staring at the tall men with wide, guarded eyes. They were getting cold. They were starting to get scared. "If you try to take them from me," Luna hissed, her voice dropping to a deadly, maternal whisper, "I will rip your throat out, Alpha King or not." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Just get in the car." With a trembling breath, Luna turned and ushered the twins toward the black SUV. Silas practically scrambled to open the heavy rear door for her. She climbed into the lavish, leather-scented interior, pulling Leo and Mia onto the seat beside her, wrapping her arms around them like a protective shield. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing them inside a soundproof vault. A second later, the driver's side door opened, but it wasn't a driver who got in. It was Cassian. He dismissed his men with a flick of his wrist, signaling them to take the other vehicle. He started the engine, the powerful machine roaring to life. The heat blasted instantly, warming the freezing cabin. As Cassian pulled the SUV away from the curb, the silence inside the car was thick enough to choke on. Luna stared out the tinted window, watching the only home she had known for 5 years blur past in the rain. Her heart pounded a frantic, terrified rhythm. The king had found her. He had seen the children. Everything she had sacrificed to build was shattering into a million irreparable pieces. In the rearview mirror, Cassian's icy blue eyes flicked back to look at them. He wasn't looking at Luna. He was staring at the twins, his expression a haunted, devastated mask of a man who had just discovered he possessed a soul he never knew existed. The drive lasted exactly 20 minutes, but to Luna, it felt like an eternity suspended in a vacuum. Cassian bypassed the main highway, steering the heavy SUV up a winding private mountain road that overlooked the town of Oak Haven. They pulled through a set of imposing wrought iron gates, the tires crunching against a gravel driveway until they stopped in front of a sprawling, ultra-modern estate made of dark timber and vast expanses of bulletproof glass. It was a pack border house, a fortress masquerading as a luxury home. Cassian killed the engine. He didn't look back as he spoke. "Bring them inside. The storm is getting worse." Luna didn't wait for him to open the door. She practically scrambled out, herding Leo and Mia up the wide stone steps. The front door was already unlocked, swinging open to reveal a massive, open-concept living area with a roaring fire in a sleek stone hearth. It was stark, beautiful, and entirely devoid of warmth. Cassian stepped inside behind them, locking the heavy door with a decisive click that made Luna flinch. "Mom?" Mia whimpered, finally breaking the silence that had gripped the twins since the diner. "Are we in trouble? Why is that man looking at us?" Luna dropped to her knees, pulling off their wet jackets. "No, sweetie, nobody is in trouble. We're just taking shelter from the rain." She forced a smile that felt like broken glass on her lips. Cassian stood near the entryway, shrugging off his wet coat. He tossed it onto a nearby chair, his broad chest rising and falling heavily. He pointed to an adjacent room, separated by a massive glass wall. Inside, a large velvet sofa sat in front of a massive flat-screen television. "There's a kitchen through there. The pantry is stocked," Cassian said, his voice rigid. "Put them in there. Turn on a movie. We need to talk." Luna stood up slowly. "I am not leaving them alone with you." "There is a glass wall, Luna. You can see them the entire time," Cassian growled, a sliver of his tightly leashed control snapping. "I am not going to hurt my own children. Put them in the room." The word children leaving his mouth sent a physical jolt of electricity down Luna's spine. She hated how it sounded in his deep voice. She hated that it was true. Sensing the escalating tension, Leo grabbed his sister's hand. "It's okay, Mom. I want to see the big TV anyway." Luna hesitated, but she knew she couldn't have this argument in front of them. She guided the twins into the adjacent room, finding a blanket to wrap around them, and turned on a random, animated movie. She left the heavy sliding glass door cracked open just enough to hear them, but closed enough to muffle her voice. When she turned back to the main living room, Cassian was standing by a crystal decanter, pouring amber liquid into a glass. His hand, usually so steady it could hold a blade to a throat without trembling, was shaking slightly. He didn't drink. He just gripped the glass, his knuckles turning stark white, and turned to face her. 5 years, Cassian said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that sounded like it was tearing his vocal cords apart. 5 years, you let me believe I had nothing." Luna let out a harsh, bitter laugh, the sound entirely devoid of humor. "I let you believe? Are you out of your mind? You threw me out, Cassian. You stripped me of my pack, my title, and my home. You gave me less than 12 hours to leave before you promised to hunt me down like an animal. Because you committed treason," Cassian roared, the glass in his hand shattering under his grip. Amber liquor and blood dripped onto the pristine hardwood floor, but he didn't even glance down. He closed the distance between them in 3 massive strides, stopping just inches from her face. "You sold pack secrets to the Southern Territories. You plotted against my counsel." "I was framed," Luna screamed back, refusing to back down, her chest heaving as 5 years of suppressed agony erupted. "I begged you to listen. I stood in that obsidian hall and begged you on my knees to look at the documents again, but you wouldn't. You took Alara's word over your own mates." At the mention of Alara's name, the rival female who had coveted the Luna position, Cassian flinched. The anger in his eyes suddenly fractured, replaced by an abyss of profound, sickening guilt. He looked away, his jaw working as if chewing on broken glass. "I know," he whispered, the sound completely broken. Luna froze. The adrenaline that had been surging through her veins suddenly halted, leaving her cold. "What?" Cassian turned back to her, his eyes shining with unshed, furious tears. "I know you didn't do it." Alara confessed. 3 years ago, when she realized I was never going to make her my Luna, she got sloppy. Her accomplices turned on her. She forged the letters. She planted the evidence. The air left Luna's lungs. 3 years. He had known for 3 years that she was innocent. I executed her myself, Cassian continued, his voice dropping to a deadly, hollow monotone. I tore her apart in front of the entire council for what she did to you. And then I started searching. Every pack, every rogue territory, every human city on the grid. I have spent 36 months tearing the continent apart looking for you, Luna. He stepped closer, his voice cracking. But you hid too well. I thought you were dead. And today, I find you. And I find out I have a son and a daughter. And they are 5 years old. Cassian raised a trembling hand, burying it in his dark hair as he looked at her with pure agony. Why didn't you tell me that day? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant before you left? Luna stared at the man who had broken her heart, feeling the tears finally spill over her eyelashes. I tried to, Cassian, she whispered, her voice trembling with the ghost of that horrific day. I said, there is something you don't know. And you looked at me with absolute hatred, and you said, I know enough. Go. Cassian stared at her, the memory of his own arrogant, catastrophic words hitting him like a physical execution. He took a staggering step backward, looking as though he had been gutted. Before either of them could speak again, a heavy, urgent knock hammered against the front door. Cassian's head snapped up, his alpha aura instantly flaring to defend the perimeter. He strode to the door and yanked it open. Silas stood on the porch, drenched in rain, his face completely pale. Alpha, Silas said, his voice tight with panic. I just got a secure transmission from the High Council. They were monitoring the border sweep. They know you pulled a rogue female into a pack vehicle. Cassian's eyes narrowed. I will deal with the Council. Sir, you don't understand. Silas swallowed hard, looking past Cassian to where Luna stood. They accessed the town's street cameras. They saw the children's faces. The council is demanding your immediate return to the capital, and they are demanding the twins be brought in for a bloodline assessment. Silas paused, his eyes reflecting sheer terror. Alpha, the council has already dispatched the Royal Guard to retrieve them. The words Royal Guard dropped into the quiet of the room like a live grenade. For a fraction of a second, the only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the muffled, cheerful music of the animated movie playing in the adjacent glass-walled room. Then, Luna's survival instincts, honed by 5 years of living as hunted prey, violently hijacked her mind. No, Luna gasped, the blood draining completely from her face. No, they will not touch them. They will not take my babies. She pivoted, her bare feet slipping slightly on the pristine hardwood, and lunged toward the glass room. She had no plan other than to grab Leo and Mia and run into the storm, to disappear into the treacherous mountain terrain where helicopters and heavily armored vehicles couldn't easily follow. She didn't make it 3 steps. Cassian's hand clamped around her upper arm, his grip like a vise of solid iron. Let me go, Luna shrieked, twisting wildly, her fingernails digging into the back of his hand. Her wolf clawed at her mind, desperate to break free, to shift and tear out the throat of the man holding her back. Cassian, let me go. You know what the council does. If they take them, they'll isolate them. They'll mold them into weapons. They'll kill me. Luna, stop! Cassian roared, not in anger, but in sheer desperation. He didn't pull her back. Instead, he stepped into her space, wrapping his other arm around her waist and pulling her flush against his chest, pinning her arms so she couldn't hurt herself in her panic. Stop! Look at me! She thrashed against him, a sob tearing from her throat. She could smell the crisp pine and ozone of his scent, a scent that used to mean safety, but had become her worst nightmare. Look at me, he commanded, his voice dropping an octave, laced with an alpha's compulsion that forced her frantic eyes up to meet his. His face was inches from hers, his icy blue eyes completely wild, stripped of every ounce of the cold, calculating king he usually portrayed. I am not going to let them take our children. Do you hear me? I will slaughter every single member of the guard before I let them touch a single hair on their heads." Luna stopped fighting, her chest heaving against his as she stared into his eyes. The absolute murderous conviction she saw there stole her breath. He meant it. He was fully prepared to go to war with his own government for the children he had only known existed for 20 minutes. Slowly, Cassian loosened his grip, letting his hand slide down her arms. He turned his head toward the open front door, his aura expanding until the air in the room felt heavy and suffocating to breathe. "Silas," Cassian ordered, his voice echoing with lethal authority. "Lock down the estate, drop the blast shields, jam all cellular and encrypted frequencies within a 5-mile radius. I want this mountain dark." Silas remained frozen on the porch, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "Alpha, locking out the Royal Guard is an act of treason against the High Council. They will declare you rogue. They will invoke the right of rebellion." "Let them," Cassian snarled, his fangs elongating slightly as he stepped toward his beta. "For 3 years, I have let those corrupt politicians run the territories because I was too busy tearing the world apart looking for my mate to care about a throne. They think I am weak. They think they can claim my heirs to control the crown." Cassian grabbed the heavy oak door. "Initiate the lockdown, Silas, or I will find a new beta tonight." Silas swallowed hard, bowing his head sharply. "Yes, Alpha." Cassian slammed the door shut, twisting the heavy deadbolts. A second later, a deep, mechanical hum vibrated through the floorboards. Luna watched in stunned silence as thick, reinforced steel shutters began to slide down over the massive panes of bulletproof glass, blocking out the storm and sealing the house in an impenetrable steel shell. The political reality of the situation crashed over Luna. When Cassian had banished her, the High Council had been the ones pushing for her exile, whispering poison in Cassian's ear. With her gone and Alara executed, Cassian had produced no heirs. The council had grown powerful in his distraction. Now, 5-year-old royal twins were the ultimate prize. If the council possessed them, they possessed the future of the kingdom. And they would absolutely execute a rogue mother to sever any competing loyalty. "How long do we have?" Luna asked, her voice trembling but finding a shred of its former strength. She was no longer just a diner waitress. She was a Luna preparing for a siege. Cassian walked toward a seemingly blank wall panel near the fireplace. "The closest garrison is at the foothills. If they mobilized immediately..." He pressed his palm against a concealed scanner. The wall clicked and slid open, revealing an extensive, heavily stocked armory. "We have less than 10 minutes. The soft, cheerful melody of the animated movie leaked out from the crack in the sliding glass door, an absurd and haunting contrast to the deadly preparations happening in the main room. Cassian pulled a matte black tactical harness from the armory wall, sliding it over his broad shoulders. He loaded magazines of silver alloy ammunition into his holsters with practiced, terrifying speed. Luna stood near the kitchen island, feeling entirely out of place. For 5 years, her biggest daily battle had been balancing a tray of coffees or making sure the twins' packed lunches were packed. Now, she was locked in a bunker with the Alpha King, waiting for an army to arrive. Cassian paused, his hand resting on a row of combat knives. He glanced over his shoulder at the glass room. "I need to speak to them," he said quietly. Luna's heart squeezed. "Cassian, they don't know who you are. They think you're just some scary man from the street." "I know," he replied, the pain evident in the tight line of his jaw. "But I need them to listen to me when the shooting starts. If they panic and run, I can't protect them." Without waiting for her permission, Cassian walked toward the glass room. He slid the heavy door open and stepped inside. Luna followed closely, lingering in the doorway, her muscles tense. Leo and Mia looked up from the television. The movie cast a soft blue glow across their faces. Mia pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, while Leo instinctively shifted closer to his sister, placing himself slightly in front of her. It was a protective, dominant gesture that made Cassian stop in his tracks. The Alpha King, A man who commanded absolute submission from thousands, slowly sank to one knee, lowering himself so he was eye level with the 5-year-olds. "Leo, Mia," Cassian started, his deep voice impossibly soft. "How do you know our names?" Leo asked, his brow furrowing in suspicion. "My mom didn't tell you." Cassian glanced up at Luna, an ocean of regret swimming in his eyes, before looking back at his son. "I know a lot of things about you. I know you're brave, and I know your mom has done an incredible job keeping you safe." He paused, taking a slow breath. "But right now, there are some bad men coming up the mountain. They want to take you away from your mother." Mia gasped, her small hands clutching the fleece blanket. "Why?" "Because they are afraid of you," Cassian said honestly, refusing to lie to them. "Because you are very important. But I need you to promise me something. No matter what you hear outside this room, no matter how loud it gets, you do not leave this sofa. You stay behind this glass, and you stay with your mother. Can you promise me that?" Leo looked at the massive man kneeling before him. He looked at Cassian's broad shoulders, the weapon strapped to his chest, and then directly into his icy blue eyes. "Are you going to fight the bad men?" Leo asked. "I am," Cassian swore, his voice rumbling with a solemn vow. "I will not let them through that door, not ever." Mia reached out, her tiny hand brushing against the dark fabric of Cassian's shirt. "You smell like the forest," she whispered, "like the trees behind our house." Cassian closed his eyes, a muscle feathering in his cheek as he absorbed the touch of his daughter for the very first time. He gently covered her small hand with his massive one. "I promise you, you are safe tonight." He stood up, his demeanor shifting instantly from a gentle father back to a lethal apex predator. He walked past Luna, stopping by the armory wall. He reached out and unclipped a beautifully crafted silver alloy short blade with a leather-wrapped hilt. He turned and held it out to Luna handle first. "You always favored the short blade," Cassian said quietly. "Close quarters, fast." Luna stared at the weapon. It was an exact replica of the ceremonial dagger she used to carry as his Luna. He had remembered. Despite the years, the anger, and the banishment, he remembered how she fought. She reached out and took the hilt. The familiar weight of the weapon grounded her. "Cassian." Before she could finish the sentence, a low, rhythmic thumping sound vibrated through the floorboards, cutting through the heavy insulation of the house. It wasn't the storm. It was the mechanical, heavy beat of helicopter rotors slicing through the rain. A red light on the security panel near the door began to flash furiously. Silas's voice crackled over the secure internal comms system. "Alpha, we have 3 heavily armored transport choppers touching down outside the main gates. They have silver-laced floodlights. They are heavily armed." Cassian didn't flinch. He shrugged off his wet dress shirt, revealing a torso covered in old battle scars and complex pack tattoos, pulling on a reinforced tactical vest. "Stay in the glass room," Cassian ordered Luna, his eyes glowing a faint, luminescent blue in the dim light of the cabin. "Lock the secondary door." He didn't wait to see her comply. Cassian walked to the heavy oak front door, disengaged the deadbolts, and stepped out onto the front porch, pulling the door firmly shut behind him, walking out alone into the freezing rain to face an entire army of his own kind. The freezing rain fell in sheets, hissing as it struck the blazing silver-laced floodlights of the 3 transport choppers hovering just beyond the tree line. Dozens of heavily armed soldiers rappelled down into the muddy clearing. They wore the stark white and obsidian tactical gear of the High Council's Royal Guard, the most elite, ruthless fighting force in the territories. Cassian stood alone on the porch, his boots planted firmly on the wooden planks. The heavy steel shutters behind him sealed the house into a fortress, but he was the final, impenetrable barrier. He didn't shift. He simply stood there, radiating an alpha aura so dense and suffocating that the front line of soldiers visibly faltered, their wolves whining in submission beneath their armor. A tall figure stepped through the ranks of the guard. Commander Vane, a ruthless enforcer who had always been a lapdog to the politicians. "Alpha Cassian," Vane called out, his voice amplified by a megaphone, competing with the thunder. "Stand down. The High Council has invoked the right of sovereign custody. You are harboring unregistered royal blood. The children must be taken to the capital for assessment." "The children are mine." Cassian's voice wasn't amplified, but the deep, primal rumble of his warning carried across the clearing, vibrating in the chests of every man present. "And anyone who takes a step onto my property will be executed for treason against the crown." Vane sneered, lowering the megaphone. "You don't have a crown anymore, Cassian. You abandoned the capital to chase a ghost. Lord Thorn and the council rule in your absence. In fact, Lord Thorn sends his personal regards. He wanted me to tell you how easy it was." Cassian's eyes narrowed, the icy blue glowing faintly in the dark. "How easy what was?" "Convincing you to throw her away," Vane laughed, the sound cruel and jagged. "Ilara was a jealous fool, but she lacked the intelligence to forge those treason documents. Thorn provided them. Thorn orchestrated the entire trial. He knew that removing your mate would break your focus, and it worked beautifully. Now, he'll take your heirs, mold them, and phase you out entirely." Inside the heavily fortified house, Luna stood trembling before a glowing security monitor Silas had activated on the wall. The external microphones picked up every word. The air rushed out of her lungs. Lord Thorn, the kindly elder councilman who had patted her hand during her trial and offered her fake sympathies. He was the architect of her destruction. Outside, the revelation didn't break Cassian. It ignited him. The last shreds of his humanity burned away in an instant. A deafening, earth-shattering roar tore from Cassian's throat. Bones snapped and reformed in the blink of an eye. Muscle expanding exponentially until the man was gone, replaced by a massive, midnight black dire wolf. He was twice the size of a normal alpha, a mythological nightmare of fangs and fury, his coat absorbing the stark light. Before Vane could even raise his silver-loaded rifle, Cassian lunged. He crossed the 30 yards of open lawn in less than a second. The impact was catastrophic. He slammed into the front line of the guard like a freight train, tossing fully armored men into the air as if they were rag dolls. Silver bullets tore through the rain, tracing deadly, glowing arcs. Several grazed his thick coat, the toxic metal searing his flesh, but Cassian didn't even flinch. The pain only fueled his rage. Silas and the two loyal enforcers burst from the sides of the house, fully shifted into their own wolf forms, flanking their king. They tore into the guards' flanks, creating a chaotic, bloody maelstrom of fur, claws, and shattered armor. But there were too many of them. Vane had brought a small army. While Cassian annihilated the main force, a specialized tactical squad splintered off, using the cover of the chopper's floodlights and the blinding storm to flank the estate. They carried heavy breaching charges packed with concentrated silver nitrate. They weren't trying to fight the king. They were trying to bypass him entirely. Inside the glass-walled room, Luna watched the secondary monitor blink red. A warning klaxon began to wail softly. Sector 4, breach. Rear utility entrance. The steel shutters hadn't fully sealed over the old servant's entrance in the back hallway. "No," Luna whispered, the silver alloy dagger heavy in her trembling hand. She spun around to face the twins. They were huddled on the velvet sofa, their eyes wide with terror, clutching each other tightly. "Stay here," Luna commanded, her voice dropping into a deadly, unyielding register. "Do not move." She stepped out of the glass room, locking the heavy door behind her, and sprinted down the darkened hallway, just as the rear entrance exploded. The concussive force of the blast threw Luna backward. She hit the hardwood floor hard, her ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. Thick, acrid smoke laced with burning silver dust poured into the corridor, burning her lungs and making her eyes water. Two figures stepped through the shattered doorway, their night vision goggles glowing like eerie green eyes in the smoke. They moved with silent, lethal precision, their weapons raised. Luna didn't hesitate. 5 years of hiding had taught her how to survive, but the threat to her children unlocked a primal violence she didn't know she possessed. She pushed herself off the floor and threw herself at the first soldier. She ducked under the barrel of his rifle, driving the silver alloy dagger upward into the weak point of his tactical armor beneath his arm. The man grunted, dropping his weapon as he collapsed. But the second soldier was faster. He swung the butt of his rifle, catching Luna squarely in the ribs. The sickening crack of bone echoed in the hall. Luna gasped, stumbling sideways against the wall, dropping her dagger. The soldier grabbed her by the throat, hoisting her off her feet. He slammed her back against the drywall, cutting off her air supply. "Secure the mother!" the soldier barked into his comms piece. "Moving to acquire the targets." Luna clawed desperately at his armored gauntlet, her vision blurring at the edges. She kicked out, trying to break his grip, but he was too strong. He tossed her aside like garbage. She hit the floor, gasping for breath, completely defenseless as the soldier racked his weapon and stepped toward the main living area, toward the glass room, toward Leo and Mia. "No!" Luna rasped, trying to crawl after him, her broken ribs screaming in agony. The soldier reached the living room. Through the glass, he saw the twins. He reached to his belt, pulling out a localized breaching charge to blow the glass door. Inside the room, Leo stood up. He didn't cry. He didn't hide behind the sofa. The 5-year-old boy stepped directly in front of his sister, placing his small hands flat against the thick glass. Luna watched from the hallway, her heart stopping. "No, baby, run!" She tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Leo's eyes, normally a bright, icy blue, suddenly ignited. They didn't just glow. They flared with a blinding, terrifyingly pure white-blue light, like a star going supernova. Beside him, Mia stood up, her small hands grabbing her brother's shirt, her own eyes flaring with the exact same celestial fire. The air in the house suddenly became impossibly heavy. The temperature plummeted. Frost instantly spiderwebbed across the glass, creeping across the floorboards. It wasn't just an alpha aura. It was something ancient, something raw. The pure, unadulterated power of a royal bloodline that had been pushed to the absolute brink of extinction. The soldier froze, his hand hovering over the detonator. He began to tremble violently. The power radiating through the glass was so absolute, so suffocating, that it forced his wolf into violent, agonizing submission. "Submit!" a voice echoed through the house. It wasn't Leo's voice. It was a dual resonance, a layered booming command that sounded like the earth cracking open. The armored soldier dropped his charge. He fell to his knees, clutching his helmet as blood began to trickle from his nose and ears. The sheer pressure of the twins' latent power was crushing his mind. At that exact moment, the front door of the estate was violently ripped from its hinges. Cassian burst into the room. He had shifted back to his human form, though he was covered in rain, mud, and the blood of a dozen guards. His chest heaved, his eyes wild with panic as he scanned the room. He saw the incapacitated soldier on his knees. He saw Luna bleeding on the hallway floor. And then he looked at the glass room. The frost, the glowing eyes, the crushing ancient weight hanging in the air. Cassian stared at his children, absolute awe crashing through the adrenaline in his veins. The twins hadn't just inherited his rank. They possessed a power the pack had not seen in centuries. A power the High Council had been desperate to steal. Cassian strode forward, grabbing the kneeling soldier by the back of his tactical vest and throwing him effortlessly through the shattered front doorway. He rushed to the hallway, dropping to his knees beside Luna. His hands hovered over her battered ribs, his icy eyes filled with a desperate, agonizing tenderness. "Luna, are you—" "I'm fine," she coughed, wincing as she pushed herself up into his chest. The twins. Cassian, what did they just do? Cassian looked up at the glass room. The glowing light in the children's eyes slowly faded back to blue. Leo looked at his hands, confused, before bursting into frightened tears, instantly turning back into a terrified 5-year-old boy. "They survived," Cassian said, his voice a low, lethal vow as he pulled Luna into his arms. "And now, we are going to the capital, and we are going to burn the High Council to the ground. Thank you so much for reading Banished by the Alpha King while pregnant." Years later, her twins said, "You look like us." If you enjoyed this cinematic, tension-filled romance and want more dramatic werewolf stories, please like, share, and subscribe for future uploads.